Long Island Backstory with Chief Correspondent Gary Jacobs.
Good evening, I'm Gary Jacobs, and welcome to another edition of Long Island Backstory, where we're filming at the Alt Studios in Hauppauge, New York. My guest today is Dr. Stephen Schiff. Dr. Schiff practices optometry in Deer Park, New York. He loves what he does, which is providing vision care to area residents and those of nearby towns, as his father did before him. He always lived on Long Island, originally from Old Bethpage. He met his former wife in 1988 upon graduating from school and was married in 1991. Things didn't work out, as unfortunately many marriages don't these days. In 2006, and then filed for divorce in 2006, although it took 3 years to be finalized. He now lives with his girlfriend in East Setauket and has 2 daughters and 2 grandchildren. But that brings us to the topic of today's show, which is the court system here, which is, as many of my viewers know, something that I'm very passionate about, the corruption and just how broken the system is here. And really nobody's exempt from the corruption except for people who have no money. So if you're totally broke, you're pretty much not going to have all problems in the court system. But if you don't even have to be rich. If you have any money that they can suck out of you here, you're going to be taken advantage of, especially here in Suffolk County. So let's get to the meat of the story. And really the main topic today is going to be more specifically one of the support magistrates that we've done many shows on, which is Support Magistrate Aletha Fields. Just a nightmare of a, I want to use woman in air quotes because I don't even like to call her a woman. She's just a miserable, nasty human being who doesn't follow the law, has vendettas against people, and has just destroyed so many lives. And I have to expose it. And this is probably my 5th show I've done on this woman. And there's going to be more to come. And God forbid she ever runs to become a real judge. I'm going to be there to make sure that that doesn't happen. So we're going to get to that. So Dr. Schiff, welcome to Long Island Backstory. And I really appreciate you coming out. Listen, I know it's not easy because you've been out of this system for many years now, and sometimes rehashing it, and we spoke, is painful, but I appreciate your coming out today and speaking about it, because hopefully this will help other people not go through the hell that you went through. So let's start from the beginning. When were you married?
1991, Gary.
Okay, and you have 2 kids. And when did the divorce start? I think I had that date wrong.
Somewhere around 2005, things started to fall apart in the marriage. The usual things that people tend to argue about: financial, raising the kids, the usual day-to-day stuff. It got to the point where conflict was pretty much the order of the day, and it was just really one fight after another, although I'll have to admit that I was in denial as to how bad things actually were. When my ex-wife started bringing up the divorce word, it still kind of caught me by surprise. In my mind, it was, okay, we're fighting, but it's not necessarily that bad. In her mind, it was like, no, we're done, and you're leaving. I'm like, well, hold on a second. If you're the one that wants the big deal,
why aren't you leaving?
Why aren't you leaving the house? So, unbeknownst to me, my ex-wife started making plans surreptitiously for divorce. Somewhere along the line, she hired an attorney. She did work with me a little bit in the office, so she had access to all the paperwork and all the files and all the financial information. So she made copies of all the relevant financial information. And then somewhere along the line, she found herself in front of a family court judge pleading a case for a temporary order of protection. And I didn't mention this to you when we were doing some of the discussion about the show earlier in the week, but kind of ironically, the first judge that she went in front of and said, I want to get a restraining or a temporary order of protection against my husband, who, for 16, 18 years never laid a hand on me, never did more than yell at me. All of a sudden, I'm afraid for my life, and I need this guy to be booted out of his house. The judge said to her, I'm sorry, ma'am, I cannot actually issue a temporary order of protection because my son goes to your husband as his eye doctor.
Oh, really?
There's a conflict of interest there.
So you got lucky on that one.
Yeah, I guess so. If the judge that issued the next restraining order was any nicer, I don't know if I got lucky or not. But either way, so I don't want to get too far away from the question that you asked me, but basically things started to go downhill very fast in 2005, 2006. After a week of conflict, I came home from work one day. I saw that my ex-wife had taken the kids and left and gone somewhere, which was not unusual for her to storm out of the house in a huff. What I wasn't expecting was a knock on the door around 11:30. 2 very polite and somewhat friendly sheriff's deputies had a message for me from the court saying, you got 10 minutes to grab whatever you can take in a 10-minute period of time and get out of the house, because you can't stay here anymore. What do you do? What do you say when somebody comes to your front door and says you got to get out of your house? I've never committed a crime. I've never been in jail before.
You didn't even go to court.
Yeah, exactly.
So you didn't even defend yourself.
Yeah. And all the allegations that were in there was also, she is afraid of you when you yell. I found out this later, is the standard stuff. You don't let her leave the room when you argue, and you block access to leaving a room. Supposedly that means you're being abusive in some way. Okay? So loss of temper, anger, yeah. All we were doing was
And
fighting.
again, the police had never been there for any domestic violence for the 16 years prior to that.
Never.
So,
not at all.
And I think, just because one of the things that struck me is that you said, listen, I'm not a guy who was arrested, and I've never had and you were so in shock when they said take your belongings that you need and you only have 5 minutes, you grabbed an ironing board.
Isn't that great? Isn't that great?
Because you were just like not thinking.
About 20 minutes later, I found a hotel up the road, and I'm sitting there laying on a queen-size bed, looking at the ceiling, with an ironing board leaning against the wall, a bag of clothes, so I'd have enough stuff for the week, saying, what the heck just happened to my life, and why did I bring the freaking ironing board? You just don't know. Your mind goes into, I got to get my shirt, and I got to work. I got to go back to work the next day. So you try to think logically while everything is kind of in turmoil.
So that was your introduction to the family court system, and you shared with me at the beginning you didn't even know anybody to hire, so you hired a lawyer that you had used for other issues that wasn't a family attorney, and he did the best he could, but you started to realize after that you probably needed somebody who specializes. Unfortunately, I believe was Dorothy Courten your wife's first attorney, or was she?
My wife eventually ended up with Dorothy Courten and Karen Villar, who were working together at the time. She had also more of a, I guess you could call it a lightweight, non-divorce specialized attorney to start with. I don't remember the woman's name right off the bat, but just like I did. When you're in a situation like that and you're scrambling, you go to the known. And as you had said, my first attorney was a fellow that I'd used for commercial business matters, wills, those kinds of things. But you really don't want to be using an attorney that doesn't do family law every single minute of their workday, especially in a high conflict divorce like mine turned out.
Well, why did it turn into that? I think that's part of the problem is Dorothy Courten, because how did your wife learn the word? Listen, there's magic words that you put in. These orders are protection. I mean, I could tell when I read them, this is going to get it and this is not. And I know who went to the lawyer because they used the right words. I'm afraid of him. I'm afraid that he's going to do this. He makes me worried. And then they throw in, sometimes they'll throw in that the kids were present, so you could throw the kids into the order of protection.
It's just it was somehow damaged by the conflict. But how do you take a person that you married, committed to spend the rest of your life with, and spend 16 to 18 years with without any problems, and all of a sudden you have to make them out to be the worst person in the world, that suddenly they need to be out of the house?
The lawyers.
Yeah, exactly.
The lawyers tell them, and I think, listen, I'm not letting your wife, your ex-wife off the hook, but you know what, a lot of this, and you even said it to me, was encouraged by her attorneys and the courts.
Yeah, no doubt. Also there are women's rights groups apparently that kind of hang out around family court.
Not as much anymore, but they used to when I was involved with one of these.
And we're going back again 10 or more years since my divorce.
I mean, they have Vibes, and there's some other ones that hang around, and they encourage them too. And you have everybody around you saying, yeah, he's a bad guy, he's a victim. You don't need this guy around.
Right, exactly.
And you believe it because even though she's doing divorce, it's still a bad time in her life. Going through, it's not easy for anybody. So she's somewhat vulnerable too, and the lawyer becomes your confidant. And listen, you know best, you're in the thing. And I would venture to say that the lawyer told her to file this order of protection. She probably said, look, this will give you an upper hand, it'll give you a breather, there'll be a temporary support, which we're going to get into now. So now we get into, you get the order of protection, you're out of your house, and we're going to skip some of the things, but eventually, not that far after, you find yourself in court for what's called a pendente lite, which is a temporary support order, so that because you're out of the house, how is she going to pay to live in the house?
Yeah, but you're also supposed to have the right of saying your side of the story, because when she's in family court and she's pleading her case to the family court judge, saying what a horrible person you are and why she's so afraid of you, you're not there to defend yourself. So it's called ex parte. So they're supposed to get you, by law, back in front of a judge so you can say your piece and be able to rectify any wrongdoing.
Within a reasonable amount of time.
Exactly. So I was really looking forward to my day in court. That was supposed to be a week later, and then it was 2 weeks later, and I think 2 or 3 weeks later we finally get in front of a judge. But that pendente lite hearing really had nothing to do with finding out the truth and finding out the facts. There's no way you're getting back into your house after 2 or 3 weeks. all we did during that pendente light hearing, I think she had to affirm that this temporary order was going to stay in place, and the judge said to me, well, we know that you only had a few minutes to get some possessions, so we can give you a couple of opportunities to go back to the house under police escort to get your odds and ends. And
From your house that you own.
Yeah, exactly. That I lived in for, the last, whatever it was, 5 or 10 years. And okay. So, and the other aspect was, of course, now that I'm not living there anymore, I have to support her so she can pay the bills in the house that I'm no longer living in.
Right.
So I don't know if you want to take it to the next step.
Yeah. So we'll go into that, the next progression.
So because my attorney is, number one, he was an Nassau County attorney, so he wasn't as familiar with Suffolk County laws, but he also is not a divorce attorney, number one. He made a couple of strategic errors, and he had said to me after we left the courtroom that there was not a need for us to go in front of the magistrate on that particular day. He says, no, let's things cool off a little bit, we'll go back another time, this doesn't have to be done right away. Well, that was a major blunder on his part, because what happened was after we left and I went home with my head still in the spinning back to my hotel with my ironing board, I found out that my ex-wife and her attorney went to see the magistrate, Aletha Fields.
Aletha Fields, who we're talking about. I don't know if it's Althea or Aletha.
Yeah, no, I think I probably say that name wrong. Whatever. 10 years ago, you can give me that. Aletha Fields. And apparently, she decided, because I wasn't there, knowing what I do know about her now after having the misfortune of being in front of her many times during my divorce, she most likely took it personally that we weren't there in the courtroom and decided, well, this eye doctor,
who does he think he is?
Exactly. Right.
But you know what? I want to go back to, because all the courts have always upheld that we always want to do everything possible to hear a case based on the merits.
Right.
How hard would it have been for her to pick up the phone and call your attorney, call you, and say, hey guys, you got an hour, you better get back to the court, you were supposed to be here. No damage would have been done.
Absolutely.
So she purposely did this.
She took the opportunity to kind of take a first shot at me, which was the first of many. 2 or 3 weeks later, I got the decision that I was responsible for, I don't want to get into exact numbers, but a huge amount of child support, more than I would be able to afford to spend, given that I now also had to find a more permanent residence for myself. Not only was the order exorbitant, not only was it much more than what a standard amount of support would be based on income tax information that my ex-wife provided to the court, it also went way past the state-mandated cap. There's income levels that
which changes every year. There's a cap, because they say, listen, if somebody makes $100,000 or $400,000, at some point you got to say it's enough, because the idea is not to enrich the person, that they could stay in the house and pay their bills. So how much do you need? Do you need $1,000, $2,000? You don't, $3,000, $4,000? There's some limit.
Right.
So there is a cap that they go by here, and this judge, which changes every year, the cap goes up. This judge just totally ignored.
Yeah. And if you're going to go over the cap, you need to have specific reasons, and this really has to be determined during a much more drawn-out hearing when you find more specifics to the case. So not only was the order very vague, it was a very much against me, very high on the percentages compared to my income as far as the support went. There also wasn't any determination as to what of that huge amount was child support and what amount was spousal support, or used to be called alimony, now it's known as spousal maintenance. So it was very carelessly done. It was very quickly done. It was very arrogantly done. Yeah, it was done with a lot of anger, I would say, for sure, Gary.
Right.
So that was.
So that was with your first lawyer who didn't know. So yes, he made a mistake, but she should have done the right thing.
Right.
There was no reason for her. She's there anyway.
Yeah.
So there was no reason for her to give you guys a call, but she did it. So now you get this order, which is supposed to be temporary, and you guys are separated. Take it to the next level. I think that at some point you reconciled.
Yeah, although, again, when I was having a little bit of the workup with you a day or two ago, and we were working on the timeline, some of this is a little bit hazy, but we did find
it was a long time ago.
Yeah, and it happens to the memory after 10, 15 years. Subsequently, we found ourselves in front of Aletha Fields, and we were, okay, right, actually you had it right.
Because what I wanted to get to is you were paying this exorbitant amount of money.
Right. I was jumping ahead.
And
6 or 8 months
right,
gone.
which was tough for you because you had to rent an apartment.
Yeah.
You were paying, plus, listen, you probably had to buy all new, household stuff, and the expenses are.
I started off in an apartment and ended up moving to an apartment that, luckily for me, I had an apartment above the office where I have my professional vision practice, so I lived there for a while. But yeah, I had to refurnish it. I had to basically support a second house.
So what I wanted to get to is then at some point you reconciled with your wife and tried to make things better and moved back into the marital residence.
Yeah.
So of course common sense would say, well, you're not going to pay this large amount of money every month because you're now living back together, trying to work things out, but you went back to paying the bills. So tell us about that. You got back together.
Let me just throw in one point that I think is relevant because it comes out later on. So yeah, at some point, my ex-wife decided to withdraw the entire order of protection and make an attempt to reconcile. There was a lot of up and down during the entire divorce. She had filed for divorce subsequent to this, withdrew it, then I eventually filed for divorce. But when she withdrew the order of protection, we were in front of a family court judge again, and we both stood up in front of the judge, and the judge said, "Are you sure that you want to withdraw this order of protection?" She said, "Yes, I do. The two parties want to reconcile and work on the marriage." "Yes, we do." So we walked out of the courtroom, and I remember the judge looking at me and giving me a wink, saying, "Okay, buddy, you did really well with this. Good luck." Oh, everything was in that wink. He didn't actually say anything to me, but okay, you pulled it out. I wish you the best of luck. When I was back in front of him again several months later, it wasn't quite the same situation. That's why I wanted to bring that up. So we had a hug in the hallway, and both attorneys were looking at us. And at a much later date, my ex-wife said to me, "I got to tell you, when Dorothy Courten saw us hugging in the hallway, she told me later on that I was absolutely disgusted by that. After things eventually didn't work out, she told my ex-wife that she was glad that it didn't, and everything else. It just kept.
But I mean, how horrible is? I mean, this is, she should be a human being, and this is one of my complaints. Dorothy Courten's a capable attorney, and I hate to say that, but she is. She's a capable attorney, but she's not a nice person.
She's capable of causing a lot of conflict between the parties, and
right,
extending a legal case.
She brings it out instead of saying, "Hey, you know what? If this works out, that's great. I'm glad." But she wouldn't make any money if it did that.
Right, of course.
And she saw a doctor who owned his own practice and said, "Hey, this is a gold mine for me."
Exactly. What I have to do is get the idea into my client's head that this thing has to really run its course.
Exactly. She didn't want it to work out.
No.
And for her to even actually say it, that she was disgusted by seeing you hug your wife, really sickens me.
Yeah, exactly. She's probably counting the dollars she's not going to have because it's not going to turn into a divorce case.
Exactly. So now you move back into the house and you're trying to reconcile, but unfortunately a lot of damage
too much damage has been done. You have what's called the second honeymoon, and everything's great after all the trauma you went through, but none of the original problems are ever resolved, so things end up falling apart.
And you have
again.
more problems because in the back of your mind, you're saying, "I can't believe this woman
the trust
filed this
eroded.
order of protection, and when could she do it again?"
Yeah, exactly. But also even before that, going through the office, getting all the paperwork, getting an attorney, filing the order of protection, the trust is just completely eroded. It's almost impossible to bounce back from
But this is one of the things that bothered me. A lot of things bother me with Aletha Fields. But you ended up, so you broke up again, you separated again, and get back to the point where then you got rid of your attorney. And is this point where you had Don Schlimbaum, or was
no,
it
there was somebody in between.
This is the middle guy.
Yeah.
Okay, so now you're number 2 attorney, and
I went to who I thought was a more experienced attorney. I ended up picking the fellow that opposed my own father in his divorce because my father's ex-wife did very well. So he was the first thought that came to mind after I realized they needed a bigger gun. So I ended up hiring him. His name was Jerry Winter. He worked in Nassau. He was getting a little bit older at the time that he took over my case. He was probably about.
He wasn't as spry as he was in your father's
It's probably
wife's
safe
case.
to say he was not in his prime anymore. He was not as spry. But he was the one that handled the next lawsuit, which was when my ex-wife sued me for contempt of court due to non-payment of child support, because during the 6 or 8 months that we were reconciled, I didn't pay any child support.
I mean, listen to this. While he was reconciled, living with his wife, living with his children, paying all the bills in the house, right?
Every single bill.
And she doesn't go to court because you're paying all the bills. There's no reason to. But now you break up again, so now she wants to go back to court retroactively and say, "Well, hey, Judge, the last 6 months while he was living with me, even though we reconciled, so there would be no reason for a support order, technically," because technically there's an order in place. You never asked to get it withdrawn.
Even though the order of protection was withdrawn, the associated child support order stays active.
So the underlying order that caused the money order was withdrawn. The underlying petition was withdrawn, presumably withdrawn because it wasn't true, because if she was really scared of you, why the hell would she take you back in the house with her and your kids? You're a violent person that needed sheriffs to come lock them up. So obviously that was bullshit. So now you're back in the house.
The person would lose credibility with the courts.
You would think. So now she goes to court, and you would think that she would say, "Well, now he owes me money for these last 6 months that I lived with him. I want to double dip." And you would think that Aletha Fields, "What are you kidding me? You took him back. Maybe let's start it again." But you don't get to get money double dipped. But what happened when you went in front of the lovely Aletha Fields?
Yes, I was given the opportunity to testify over a 2-day period, 3 to 4 hours total. And I was allowed to speak. And I was actually very surprised because...
Me too. Unless she thought she was doing it to bury you.
Yeah, because Aletha, for the most part, would cut me off as soon as I tried to say something or argue a point or at least have the opportunity, try to get the opportunity to counter something that my ex-wife was saying. She shut me up every single time. But
can I
finally,
do the look? She would sit there like this at the desk, because I've seen it, with her
the glasses
glasses,
and look over
drop
the
them
top.
down and look, you are an asshole
Right,
for talking,
right.
and look up. Sometimes she'll shut the person up,
Yeah.
but usually she'll just look at them like, you are an asshole for
Yeah,
speaking.
and that's all it takes, because you're intimidated, because you know this
course.
woman has the capability to
Destroy
make
your
major
life.
decisions that can affect you for the rest of the life.
Right. So you have a hearing, but you're thinking, oh, this is great.
Yeah.
You know, first of all, I paid all the bills legitimately. In fact, you even told me, not only did you pay all the bills, you gave your wife money on top
Right,
of
she would
the
have
bills.
money for the household
So
budget.
she didn't have to go to you for money.
Right, exactly. She had a weekly amount that would bring home a check or whatever. Paid all the oil bills, all the electric bills, the mortgage, the car insurance, the health insurance, and I had documentation of all this.
So you were happy that you were getting all this out.
Yeah, exactly. Aletha Fields is just sitting there not saying anything, giving the occasional look, but knowing in the back of her mind that none of this ever mattered, which I found to be the case, Gary, not only with this, but during my divorce. They'll let you talk for hours and hours, and you walk out of there thinking, I really banged this out. I made a perfectly clear case. There's no way anything's going to happen. And then you get a decision that defies any
Looks
sort
like you
of
weren't even in
logic
front of
and
the
common
judge.
sense. Did
Because
they
the
even
decision's
listen?
been made.
Yeah, exactly. She made a decision from the day I walked into that courtroom. So long story short, she allowed maybe a trivial amount, or maybe a check or two that I wrote here or there. The rest of it, she says, no, it doesn't count. It wasn't support because it wasn't written as a check. Therefore, it's considered a gift or whatever. She wanted to use as her way of rationalizing this. It doesn't count. You're in contempt of court for, I don't want to get to the number. It was
But a
many
huge number.
thousands
Well,
of
the
dollars.
6 months, almost the full amount of what the order was for,
exactly.
even though you paid for everything.
Right.
So and plus, there was no bills, so if you would have write her this large check,
she didn't have money
there would
for
be
bills.
no
They were
reason
already
to use
paid.
it, because there was no
Exactly.
bills anymore. She
Exactly.
stayed in the house and paid all that. But I think
And that was the case that we made, and that was the case that my attorney made in his opening argument before I came in with the proof. So she's double dipping. She's using the same money that she
right.
needs for bills for something else.
And what really is disgusting, what this disgusting woman did is, would she hold you in contempt of court? She now she can't put you in jail because she's not a real judge.
Right, she doesn't
she
have the
thinks she's a
authority.
judge. She wants to act like a judge, but she technically can't sign an order to incarcerate somebody. So then they bring it to another judge who rubber stamps what she says.
Right.
But
Now-
she actually referred you to incarceration for, was it 60 or 90? 60
Okay, so she says you got to see the family court judge up on the 3rd or 4th floor. So I remember this eternal walk. It almost must be like when the person's walking to death row, whatever it is, and they're waiting for the electric chair. I'm walking out of the courtroom. I'm in contempt of court. Something horrible is going to happen to me. My attorney, Jerry Winters, in the elevator with me. We're going upstairs. We sit in the back of the courtroom, and he says, "Yeah, you might actually be seeing some jail time out of this, but don't worry, it's a nice jail. It's where people go when they do white-collar crimes like tax evasion." He's saying this to a professional eye doctor who has never been arrested, never been in jail. Oh, you go to jail, but it's a nice jail. I don't even know what I said to that. Do they have a pool table? Some jails have a pool table.
Yeah, and your practice is going to do really well too while you're in jail.
It would have been over if I had to do jail time. I can't imagine what some of these fellows go through that are professionals, that are doctors, and all of a sudden they have to be, locked away for a couple months and they can't run their businesses. It's impossible. So I ended up in front of the same judge that had given me the wink when I was there a couple of months before. Good luck. And now he's in front of me, apologetically, almost saying, "Well, the support magistrate has found you in contempt of court for this large amount of money. I really have no choice but to sentence you to," and I don't remember the exact amount, but it could have been a life sentence. It was 60 days, 90 days.
Who cares?
Like
If it's any more than one day, it's ridiculous.
forget it.
This is what we want in our society.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, jail is to protect us from people.
Right.
You're a professional who was working, paying money, and they're going to put you in jail for something so ridiculous.
For paying twice the amount of child support over a
Right.
6 or 8 month period. So, but he gave me the opportunity to purge the contempt order, as long as I come up with
Which
whatever
means
the
you
amount
have
of
to
money
pay whatever amount they say, which in your case was the full amount that she said that Fields said that you owed.
Yeah, there was no break. I know you would ask me that.
Right, because
earlier.
sometimes they'll say the purge is less, but
they banged me for the whole amount. Luckily, I had emergency savings aside, so I went and I pulled the money
But
out
that
of the
doesn't
bank.
change it. She didn't know that you had that.
Right, of course
That she
not.
was finding contempt is willful.
Right.
You were. How is that willful when you were living together?
Yeah.
This
Clearly
judge
we're
didn't
reconciled.
follow the
Clearly
exactly.
we were voluntarily living under this
Right. She
arrangement.
didn't call the police on you and say
Right.
he's back in my house. You were trying to work it out.
Yeah, exactly. And she got up in front of the family court judge and pulled back the order of protection.
Right.
So I was able to purge the contempt, and I did not have to go to jail. And that was the first time that I was in front of Aletha Fields.
And then, unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time. This is really a 2-hour show.
Yeah.
But,
Wow.
but what we wanted to get across is that Aletha Fields was not fair to you. You were a good guy. Your wife with
I know we're out of time, but just one quick,
No, we got a
quick
couple
points
minutes,
I wanted
so
to make
I wanted
was
to get-
the way just to give you an idea of the way she was in the courtroom, she kept referring to me as Mr. Schiff, Mr. Schiff, Mr. Schiff, and sternly, Mr. Schiff. Now, I'm a doctor. I've earned the degree. People refer to me as Dr. Schiff. It started to bug me. So at one point I said, "Excuse me, it's Dr. Schiff. It's my courtroom. I'll call you what I want." Like, just shut the hell up. You have no right. You have no.
you're a piece of shit in my court.
Yeah, basically.
You know, but, and as I said to you, you know what? Next time she does that, say, okay, Aletha, I'll call you what I want to call you.
I wish I knew now after talking
no,
to you.
your ass would have been in jail.
Exactly. Don't follow this guy's advice.
It's easy for me to say. But, you know, but really, there's so many things. I wanted to get to the point you ended up hiring an attorney, C Donald Schlimbaum, just a nasty, obnoxious prick who all he wanted to do is bilk you. He saw you as dollar signs. And you talked about how you and your ex, again, try to reconcile another time, and you would go to the diner and work things out, and then he would basically say, don't do it.
Right.
Dorothy Courten on her side is encouraging the fight, and the two of them were just encouraging
I could just
fight.
picture those two attorneys telling both their clients not to talk to each other because it takes the clients entirely out of the loop. Then the attorneys go to their own diner and they talk about how much money they're bilking.
And I think you said Schlimbaum even told you, stop talking to her.
Right, exactly.
Why did you
Let
stop
us
talking
handle
to
it. Well, you haven't handled it. It's been 3 years and tens of thousands of dollars in legal fees. Yeah, I have to handle it because someone's got to stop the runaway train, and it certainly isn't going to be the attorney.
And I also talk about one thing about Aletha Fields also. At one point, you and your ex-wife, she started to calm down a little bit as the divorce went on. You said you agreed that you wouldn't go through Child Support Enforcement Unit for the collections. They're a nightmare of an organization to deal with, and it's a big bureaucracy in government. And you said, look, let me pay you separately. Listen, she knows you're a good guy at the end of the day, obviously, or she wouldn't have agreed to this. And she agreed, and you came up with an agreement, and you went in front of Aletha Fields and said, hey, we've agreed that we're going to just go through, and I'm going to pay my ex-wife direct instead of going through the government, essentially, to do this. And what was her reaction to that?
Again, just to quickly go back on that, after the divorce was over, and my ex-wife did eventually talk to me at one point and say, you know, I realized rather belatedly, my attorneys got in my ear, they told me things, they promised me things that weren't actually going to happen, they built my expectations up too high, and it was just, you know, it was out of control. She was actually very apologetic about it. This is unfortunately after spending
a little too late,
$200,000 in legal fees on both sides.
And the mental anguish and the torment to your children
Exactly.
and all
but
that.
she did realize that she came around, and after the divorce was over, there were a few post-divorce actions that had to be filed, mainly related to the kids. I don't know if I mentioned this the other day, but one at a time, my two children came to live with me.
Right.
That had to be changes in support. But this was in relation to the fact that my daughters would be attending college, and because I was paying directly through Child Support Enforcement Bureau, anytime we wanted to make a change in support, because I would be getting a credit toward money I spent toward college, we would have had to go back to court. So by taking ourselves out of the system, so I wouldn't have to pay child support directly through the system, we could stipulate to everything on our own, just submit the paperwork to the courts. Aletha Fields made it impossible, almost impossible. She said to my ex-wife in the courtroom, why do you want him to be off the hook? Why do you want him to be able to pay you directly? He won't pay anything if he doesn't have to pay it to the courts. Trying to totally unravel what we had worked together to do. Now, I have to give my ex-wife credit. She didn't buckle, and she said, no, this is what we worked out, and this is what we're going to do. But it was this fight and struggle with the magistrate every step of the way through the divorce. She couldn't have made things any more difficult than they were.
So this is a warning to anybody, you know, Aletha Fields, first of all, anybody who's thinking about nominating this woman to ever become a judge. She doesn't have the demeanor of a judge. She doesn't have the intelligence. She's a stupid, nasty bitch, is not respectful to people. In my opinion, she hates men. She's disrespectful to men. She doesn't like people who make more money than her. She's intimidated by doctors, by police officers. She has her own axe to grind because her ex-husband was a court officer. So I guess she doesn't like anybody. She doesn't like men in general, but she probably doesn't like, you know, court officers, policemen.
From what I understand, her divorce was only shortly before my divorce. That was probably
so she was really fresh. But
I
somebody like that should not be in this. Clearly, she didn't follow the rules. Also, I want to warn everybody: if you're thinking about using Donald Schlimbaum, if you're thinking about using Dorothy Courten, think twice about it. This is not somebody who's going to get you out of this unscathed. You want somebody who's going to look out for your best interest, meaning get you out of here without spending money and all this mental anguish and years in court. I believe if she didn't have somebody like that, and you didn't have somebody, you had lawyers say, guys, work together. You guys didn't hate each other at that point where you wanted to kill each other. Mm-hmm. You could have settled it. You know, you didn't believe your wife even wanted to put you in jail if it wasn't for the attorney.
I think she was driven. I think she was manipulated by her attorneys to some degree.
Right.
Absolutely.
So, you know, and you're vulnerable. So I'm not making excuses for it, but at a vulnerable time, you listen to your attorneys.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, and I
remember, you reminded me of something. I called Donald Schlimbaum's office one time because there was some kind of a crisis related to the divorce. He's not back until next week. Well, where is he? I need to talk to him. He's on vacation. Vacation now? He says, yeah, being a divorce attorney is very stressful. He takes a lot of vacation. Are you kidding me?
Yeah. While your life is falling apart, he's not going to
stressful
take
for them.
I thought
that was amazing.
Well, we're out of time, Dr. Schiff. Again, thank you very much for coming out. And again, 10 years later, 12 years later, I appreciate that you did reach out to me after seeing the show and say, you know what, I need to tell my story about Aletha Fields too, to warn people. And if it could happen to you, you know, a professional, obviously a smart guy, you know, you graduated medical school, so so it can happen to anybody, and you have to be careful. I'm Gary Jacobs, and thank you for joining us for Long Island Backstory.
Island Backstory is made possible in part by Americans for Legal Reform, the oldest, most successful legal group in the world. P.O. Box 2679, Huntington Station, New York 11746. Telephone 631-421-6390. Website Americans, 4, legalreform.com.